Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of After Dark. After Dark is part of the Paranormality Media. You can find us at paranormalityradio.com. On today's episode, I have Mark Vecchitto, the haunted chef, and we're going to be talking about haunted restaurants, which is one of my favorite things to do is go find haunted restaurants. And especially since you're from the New England area, Mark, I'm sure there's a lot of them up there, and I'm sure that when I visit, I'll have a plethora of places to go to.
Oh, absolutely. Jack, thanks for having me on the show. This is great. Well, I like talking about this stuff because, I'm a chef. I've been a chef for like 40 years. So 40 years as a chef, I've been in quite a few restaurants, all over New England, all over the United States. And you wouldn't believe how many are haunted or have things going on, a lot of paranormal things going on inside the restaurant. Um, it all started with Jesus Christ, probably like 30 years ago in Meriden, Connecticut. There was a little, it was a small restaurant. It was called the Hanover House. It's not even there anymore. They tore it all down. But I'm working in this kitchen. It's kind of, all by myself. It's a big place, big kitchen. It was a kind of slow night, so I was just all by myself in there. And behind me was a hallway, like where that door is. There was no door, but it was a hallway that went down to the left hand side. And at the end of that hallway was an office that just creeped me out. No one ever went in there. There was no door on that office either, and it was just like old crap, a bunch of just old office crap in there. And the owner of the restaurant came in to me one night and he's like, "Hey, do you ever go down there into the office?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Yeah, just kind of like stay out." And I'm like, "Why? Is there like something?" He goes, "No, just you don't want to be in there. It's just you just don't want to be in there." I'm like, "All right, cool." So that didn't bother me. So it was a slow night, like I said, and I doing whatever I was doing, cooking a steak or burgers or whatever the hell, and I hear, "Hey, Mark." And I look around, there's no one in the kitchen. So I'm like, oh, maybe that was someone out in the restaurant calling me. So I walk through the doors, go out into the restaurant bar area, and I look, and there's just a bartender and a couple people at the other end of the bar. And I'm like, someone calling me? Bartender goes, no. Okay. Go back into the kitchen, cooking. Hey, Mark. Now that came from behind me. That came from down that hall. All right. So I kind of like peek down the hall. Nothing going on. All right, go back to work. I'm like, nah, it's just my mind playing tricks on me. Third time. Hey, Mark, come here. I'm like, nope, can't do this. Right. So I walked out. I'm like, listen, guys, I'm going home tonight. I'm done. I'm hearing things in the back room. And the bartender comes to me. She goes, oh, yeah, yeah, you got to stay out of that back room. I'm like, what the? So apparently, the owner of the restaurant years ago ended up blowing his head off in that office. And there's been all kinds of craziness that went on back there. The new owner of the restaurant was into all kinds of crazy demonology and stuff. And he actually had a Necronomicon. And I saw the book. I didn't want to touch it. He kept it in that office. He kept it in that office there underneath the filing cabinet where no one could, get at it. But the guy he was kind of weird. So that was just a real basic haunting. It gets better.
I would say after
So
that, I'd be done. When somebody calls my name three times,
three times,
yeah,
three
no.
times in one night. And actually, when I went back to the restaurant, I brought a boombox with me and just blasted it, so I just couldn't hear anyone calling me. It was just like, I'm done, man. I can't deal with this. But see, it goes back to even further where ghosts don't bother me. They kind of follow me. We lived in a house in Meriden uh, when I first got married to my first wife, and we had two children at the time. We didn't have the third yet, and we we started having issues in the house where doors would close, lights would turn on, the usual run-of-the-mill haunting. So it kind of got to a point where we kind of joked about it. Oh, is that the ghost again? Ha ha, is it the ghost or is it the kids? So one Sunday night, me and my wife were in bed. Now we had a living room, was like, it was an older house from the probably mid to early 1800s, huge house, Victorian. Um, so when you walk into the living room, that was the center of the house. The kitchen was off to that side, and we had a bedroom over there that was my son's, and our bedroom was behind French doors, these giant French doors that looked out into the living room. So it was a Sunday night, probably around 10 o'clock at night, and remember in the 80s they had that plastic runner that they used to put on the carpet between the door and wherever you go to, that little plastic runner
Oh
so you
yeah.
wouldn't get mud all over the rug. And if it flipped over, it had those little spikes on it and you'd step on them like Legos.
You know,
So
I would be a dick, and when I would come home at night, because even when I was in high school in like the '90s,
yeah,
my parents
we still
still
have
had
them.
them. Yeah, I'd flip them upside down when I came home at
Yeah.
night. Oh yeah, I'd wake up to
So
some
yeah.
cussing.
So we're laying in bed. It's 10 o'clock. And we hear little footsteps walking on the plastic runner. So my wife says to me, Alan's up. You got to go. He's probably got to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, yeah, so let him go to the bathroom. She's like, no, 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 no. He can't reach the light in the bathroom. You've got to go in there. Otherwise, he's going to pee all over the walls and stuff. So I'm like, all right. So I turned over in bed and I looked towards the living room. And there was this little person. And he walked to the kitchen door and he put both hands on either side of the door and swung in and then swung back out and then swung in and turned around and looked at me and smiled and then ran into the kitchen. Now I'm like, that didn't look like Alan. All right. So he goes into the kitchen. Now, at the end of the kitchen was our bathroom. So my wife's like, go, go, go. He's gonna piss all over the floor. You gotta go. You gotta go. So I run into the kitchen, go into the bathroom, and there's nobody there. The light is off. There's absolutely no one there. So I go back into his room. He's sound asleep. All right. Now this was the start of all this craziness that happened in my house. Um, then it got worse, where all of a sudden doors would slam shut and then open back up again. And then someone would walk up the steps. We would hear them walk up to the steps and up to our front door. No knock. And we'd look out and there'd be nobody there. All right. So that started getting creepier and creepier. And then one night my son's screaming in the middle of the night in his bedroom. We go into his room and he's sitting there at the middle of his bed. He's got what seems to be blood all over him, all over his hands, all over his face. His dresser was thrown across across his room. There was a television on top that was smashed on the floor. He was, like 28 pounds. There was no possible way he could have done that. All right. So we had to get Ed and Lorraine Warren. We talked with them. Lorraine was really cool. She, the first time we actually saw that they were doing a seminar one night, and it was like 2 weeks in advance. So me and my wife decided, well, let's go to the seminar and check it out. And because we were into that kind of thing. And my wife's like, well, why don't we talk to them about what's going on in the house? So, okay, cool. So we watched the seminar. It was really cool. And Ed and Lorraine were signing autographs at the time. And Lorraine had a crowd of people around her and she was signing books. And, I kind of like hung back and I was like, let her do her thing before I start bothering her because she doesn't really know me. And she stopped signing the books and she looked right at me, eye contact, told everyone, I'll be back later. I need to talk to him. She pushed her way through the crowd, came right to me. And she's like, you've got an issue, don't you? And I'm like, yeah. And she said, what can I do to help?
Oh
So we
wow.
explained to her what was going on. And she told us what to do, and gave me her number and told me to call her if it kept up. Well, it did keep up. It didn't help. So they actually had to come out to our house. And whatever they did worked, but we were already in the midst of, we're getting the hell out of there. We're not going to stay because we got two kids. My wife woke up one morning and the palms of her hands were stained with a rust color, we don't know what. And my oldest daughter, the exact same thing. Both of their hands were stained. They couldn't wash it off. It lasted a week on both of their hands. And they woke up that way in the morning. They did nothing the night before. Right? Just craziness. So they kind of follow me. Right? I worked in a restaurant in New London, Connecticut, which was it was a German restaurant, very medieval, uh, to say the least. Um, we had three dining rooms in it, and the bar was just massive. It was probably about 120 years old. All this ornate wood, really cool, but it was dark. And we had a suit of armor in the bar near this giant fireplace with this deer head up on top of it. So you know what I'm talking. It looked like an old German castle, right? Um,
That sounds like a lot of fun.
yeah, and it's a cool place. So it had three dining rooms, and when you walked into the front door, you would walk in the front door, and you'd either take a left and you'd go to the bar, or you'd take a right and you'd go to the middle dining room. Now, both of those doorways were glass doors that opened up. So when you walked into the foyer, you either went left or you went right, and you had to go through a door. So it's night. I'm closing up the restaurant one night, and I go into the bar, and I have the bartender, and she's cleaning stuff up. And I asked her, I says, Kim, is everybody's out of here? We're good to go. She like, oh yeah. She goes, no one's been here for about a half an hour or so. I'm like, okay, cool. So I do my usual rounds. I walked through the doors. I walked into the second dining room. I looked around. There's nobody there. I walked into the third dining room. In the third dining room, in the corner table, looking out the window, was a lady in a green sweater. And she ignored me, but kept staring out the window. So I look and I'm like, what the hell? So I went through the dining room, the back of the dining room, which would bring me into the kitchen and back out to the bar. It was a big circle. And I go into the bar. I'm like, Kim, I thought you said there's no one here. And she goes, there's no one here. And I said, there's a lady in the dining room. She goes, there can't be. I said, no. There's a lady sitting in the dining room. So we both walk in there. She wasn't there. Okay. So that same night, Kim goes home. I close the front door and I lock it. And I close those two side doors because they're open. They got the little pedal that holds them open. You know what I mean? So I closed those two side doors and I went up into the office. And I hear this weird banging, right? What the hell is that? So I go downstairs and I'm like, did I lock the door? I said, yeah, I know I locked the door. I let Kim out and I locked the door behind her. I get down into the bar area, and both of those side doors were open, propped open. The door was locked. There was no one in that building but me. Okay. So I'm like, okay, things are starting to happen. So as time went on, it got more aggressive. Let's say, whoever it was, it got more aggressive. We would be talking in the bar area, me and maybe a bartender or one of the line cooks or something. And more than once, we would be standing there and a glass, that usually holds the stirrers and stuff like that, sitting on the bar, literally went sideways over the bar, dropped on the floor and smashed. We all saw it. No one was near it. All right. And we're like, holy cow. Then we would get this weird smell. I can't even describe it. It wasn't like death. It wasn't like garbage. It wasn't like grease. It was just this weird, musty, heavy smell that would come and go in different places of the restaurant. Um, the owner came to me one night and we were talking about the next shift or whatever the hell we were talking about. And he's like, I got to go to the bathroom. So I'm like, all right, whatever. So he goes into the bathroom in the bar and he comes out and he's like, there's some guy in there. And he's like coughing and choking and like, he's like choking. And I asked him if he was okay, but he didn't say anything. He goes, should I check on him again? I'm like, did you look under the stall? He's like, well, no, I didn't want to bother the guy. Well, I said, well, the guy's dying. So I said, let's go check. So we go into the bathroom. Absolutely no one there. And no one came out because we were standing by the door. All right. So a few weeks go by. I'm in the exact same space and I hear coming out of the bathroom. I'm like, whoa, what the hell? So I go in the bathroom and I looked under the stalls. Absolutely no one there. So I come back out and I looked at the bartender and she says, did you hear that too? And I said, yes, there's no one there. She goes, this has been happening for the past week and a half. I'll be in the bar and I hear someone in the men's room like dying and choking. And she goes, but I'm not going in there. And she goes, and no one ever comes out. She goes, I thought it was like next door, the restaurant next door. I said, there is no restaurant next door. It's a freaking market. And the walls are concrete. There's no possible way that could have been from next door, you know? So again, we were cleaning up the bar. It's always happened in the bar area and upstairs. We're cleaning up the bar and the bartender was holding wine glasses. So she had, I don't know, 6 or 8 wine glasses in her fingers. You know what I mean? She was holding
Yeah.
all the wine glasses. She took them out of the dishwasher. She was going to put them on the bar. I turned around to go in the kitchen. I hear smash. I turned around and look, she's on the floor with her hands cut to ribbons. And she's like, somebody pushed me. Somebody pushed me. I thought she was going to bleed to death. We called 911. They got an ambulance. I had to put tourniquets on her wrists so she would. She's like, someone pushed me, Mark. Someone pushed me. I said, but there was no one there. She goes, somebody pushed me down. I didn't trip. She was a mess. The girl had to have surgery, all kinds of stitches in her hands. It was horrible. But this kept getting, again, I'd go in to open up the place in the morning and I'd go into the kitchen area, the dish pit. All of a sudden you'd hear pots and pans banging around. I figured it's my guys coming in early. So I go around to the back into the pit. Nobody there, nothing touched, just noise, but it wouldn't do it in front of me. So my guys started getting creepy, all right, because we were, we all experienced it. We all experienced weird things. And we were standing in the shift again at the bar. We all got a beer in our hands. One of my line cooks just turns pale white, drops his beer on the floor, and he starts screaming. What the hell's going on with you, dude? He's like, somebody grabbed my throat, man. Somebody just grabbed me by. I'm like, we were all standing right here. He goes, no, somebody just grabbed my throat, Mark. He goes, I can't work here. He freaking quit on me. All right.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Wow.
So the guys start, everyone's getting creeped out about it. And now they're playing games with me. Okay. So I go into the office one morning I came in and I was not the last to leave. It was one of my sous chefs. And I go up into my office and I open the door and someone moved that suit of armor and put it in the doorway of my office. Jesus Christ. I almost had a freaking heart attack. You
I can
open your office
imagine.
door and there's this giant suit of armor standing there. None shall pass. Yeah.
And I'm sure it had the sword and everything with it.
He did. He had
Yeah.
the sword and everything. They I don't know how the hell they did it, but they moved him up there just to bust my ass. So things started happening to the owner. Personally, he lost his house, but he owned the restaurant. He had something was going on, just like it affected him. He lost his house. His father passed away. He freaked out, and he's like, I'm moving back to Oregon, where I came from. I'm just leaving. You want the restaurant? I'll give it to you. I'm like, I don't want this restaurant. So he leaves. My my line cooks bought it. All right. I took off. I went to another place, which was even better. So I go to this place in Mystic, Connecticut, which was built in 1636 by the Captain Daniel Packer. Now, Captain Daniel Packer was a privateer, so he's a legal pirate. And yeah, I guess he plundered some things and everything. Well, anyhow, he built this house, which is now a restaurant. So the house is older than the United States. It was built in the, 1600s, 1700s, somewhere around there. Well, he had a niece. Her name was Ada. She died of scarlet fever when she was 7 years old. Okay. And she is still in that restaurant today. So when I got hired, the owners come to me and she says, this place is haunted. I'm like, I heard about that, but that doesn't bother me. I says, there's so many damn ghosts following me around. It doesn't even matter. So she goes, okay. She goes, just don't provoke them. No problem. So my first encounter with anything in that restaurant, I was now the bar was cool. The bar was in the basement of the restaurant. And it used to be where the captain would bring slaves in and hide them out in the basement and get them the hell out of there. So it was kind of like an underground railroad type thing. He was bringing the slaves in from the south, and trying to get them out. I'm sure there was money involved. I'm sure there was some kind of money because he didn't do anything if it didn't make him money. So I'm in the I'm in the bar one day, and I'm with the guy that cleans the beer lines, and we're just talking and shooting the shit. It's like 7:30 in the morning. Everything's locked up because he came in that door, the bottom door where I came in because I met him outside, unlocked the door. So we're in there talking in the bar, and all of a sudden we hear these heavy, heavy boot prints walk across the ceiling. Well, the restaurant floor upstairs from the fireplace area, which is nowhere near a door, to the kitchen area. So it's definitely right across over our heads. And we heard the boots, right? So I'm like, who the hell is that? So I run up the stairs and I look, there's nobody there. And I'm like, and I get this really weird feeling like there's something watching me, and I'm getting goosebumps right now. Something watching me. It's kind of, I'm getting this weird chill. I go back into the basement and I'm like, there's nobody there. And the guy's like, come on. I'm like, no, there was no one there. It's like 3 minutes later, the boots again, walking across the floor upstairs, heavy, heavy boots. And I'm like, son of a bitch. That's got to be the captain, right? So, well, let him do whatever he's got to do. I'm staying down here. So the guy finishes his beer lines and everything, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go and I'll come back later. So I locked up and I came back around 10 o'clock in the morning. I come in, I kind of like looking around, and I'm standing there, and I get my chef coat on, and I start, getting some prep work done and everything, and then all of a sudden I feel someone tugging at the back of my chef coat. And I turn around. There's nobody there. It's okay. All right, whatever. So I kept doing it, prepping, doing whatever I had to do. And again, pulling at my chef coat like a little kid would. So by this time now, my staff is coming in, and I'm like, I ignore it, whatever. So we had a meeting that day up on the third floor. Now, the third floor was a big banquet area. And before the meeting, I had the servers go upstairs and they set all the tablecloths up and put tablecloths on the table and everything. And they walked out, and we'd walk back into the room, and all the corners of the tablecloths that were on the table were flipped up and laying on the table. And the server looked at me and she goes, "It's Ada. She's playing with us." And I'm like, "Ah, oh, really?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, she'll do this all the time." She would follow people into the bathroom. It was a unisex bathroom because it was the third floor. It was an old house, People would go into the bathroom and shut the door, and as they were walking past the mirror, they would see a little girl follow them through into the bathroom. They'd freak out, go running. A lot of times the door would shut behind them, and it was a latch door that you had to slide that latch to lock it. We broke that door down so many times because after she was in the bathroom scaring people, she would lock the door. And you couldn't get into the bathroom because the only way you could lock it was from the inside. All right. So, so we have this meeting upstairs, and I have a brand new sous chef, and she's sitting there in the meeting, and, we're talking business and everything. And I said, "Okay, guys, let's get to work. Let's get out of here." And from the hallway, in the staircase in the hallway, we hear "bye bye," and it was a little girl's voice. My sous chef, she's like, well, who was that? And I said, that's Ada. She goes, who's Ada? I said, a ghost. She flips out. What do you mean? I said, it's a girl, a little girl. She died here and she's still here. So she liked kids, obviously. She was a little kid. So she liked kids. And when kids came to the restaurant, she would get pissed off when they'd leave. Like if they left, if the kids were having a good time and screwing around with each other and stuff like that, they would talk. And sometimes they would talk to somebody that wasn't there. And people would see it all the time. Right? And the kids would just like it was somebody there. So when they would leave, things would happen because she was getting pissed off because they were leaving. So she'd throw straws and knock the straws off the tables or the bar and stuff, and throw napkins on the floor and make the menus fall because the little kids were leaving. Okay. So I'm telling a friend of mine this. His name is Chef Plum. He does a bunch of video stuff. He hosts a bunch of shows on YouTube, Restaurant Road Trip and Edible Nutmeg and stuff like that. So he calls me one day and he's like, dude, let's do a show in your restaurant about the ghost. I'm like, well, let me ask the owner, right? So I asked the owner. She goes, yeah, just don't break anything and don't make fun of Ada. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I said, yeah, we could shoot a show and, we could shoot an episode. So he goes, cool, cool. So we set up the date and everything. He shows up with his crew and everybody, and they're setting up cameras and stuff. And his wife was there with his 3 daughters. Now, his youngest daughter was 7 years old at the time. He dressed her up in clothes from, like the 1700s, those long dresses and stuff. And I said, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, dude, so while we're doing scenes, I'm going to have her kind of like walk in the background every once in a while and just like Ada. And I'm like, all right, whatever. So he does this and we do the show, and every once in a while you'd see this little girl walk behind us or walk up the stairs, and it's like he's doing this, right? So we get done filming, and he was outside in the parking lot filming some final scenes or whatever he screwed up in the beginning. I don't know. So his wife and 3 kids were with me, and I had to go up into my office and get something. And they're little kids, and they were cool, and they liked me, so they followed me. So we all go up to the office together, and they're all asking me about Ada. So I had brought, there's a folder in the filing cabinet with some of her writings when she was a little kid, just drawings and scribblings. And they have a bunch of history on her and the house and everything like that. So I'm telling the kids about Ada, and we're having a good time and we're talking. Now, on my wall in my office was a charity. We had bought, remember the Sandy Hook tragedy where all those little kids got killed?
Yeah.
Well, we had bought this, like a ribbon that had 3 bells on it, kind of like sleigh bell type things. And it was, a charity event. It supported the families, whatever. They happen to live, Chef and his family happens to live in Sandy Hook. So they're on those little bells are on my wall, and we're all in my office and we're talking about Ada and we're blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, we got to go, kids. Let's go. Time to go, kids. Let's go say bye to Ada. So all the kids are like, bye, Ada, bye, Ada. Thank you. I said, thank her. Make sure, say thank you for letting you guys into her home and everything. And they're like, thank you, Ada. Thank you. We turn around to leave, and the bells on my wall ring 3 times. Chef Plum's wife froze in her tracks when that happened. And she turned around and she looked at me and she goes, did that really happen? I said, absolutely. That happens a lot. So we leave. I lock the door. We go, and I get home. And, I say bye to everybody, the film crews go on, blah, blah, blah. I get home. And my wife, I go into the house. My wife's like, so how'd it go? So I went good. I said, we did the filming and everything. Everything was really cool. Ada showed up, and she kind of like rang the bells in my office. And I said, for the kids. And I said, yeah, well, Chef Plum dressed up his little one as kind of like Ada. And in different scenes, we'd have her walking through backgrounds and stuff. And my wife's like, you shouldn't have done that. I'm like, why? I said, it wasn't me. It was him. And she's like, come on, man, you're poking fun at her. Things could happen. I'm like, no. I said, no, it was not, we weren't making fun of her, right? Blah, blah, blah. Go to bed. Next morning, my wife comes in the bedroom. She wakes me up. She's like, hey, jokester, why don't you go look out in the backyard? I'm like, what? She goes, go look in the backyard. I'm like, what? I go in the backyard and I have a gazebo out there. It was turned over on its side. All right. The it was summertime, so you know how you get dew in the grass in the morning, and if you walk through it, you could actually see footprints in the dew. There was none. All right. So this gazebo is on its side, but the drips of water on the gazebo were dripping down as if it were sitting straight up, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
They were dripping this way, but it was on its side and they were still dripping sideways.
Weird.
All right.
Yeah.
I had a wood pile next to it. The wood pile was literally strewn throughout my backyard, but all facing the ocean. So the I don't know how to describe it. The gazebo was on its side, and the top of the gazebo, I live on the beach, so it was facing the ocean. All the wood on my wood pile, which was huge, about at least 3/4 of a cord, was thrown towards the water. And I had a fence on the side of my driveway that was literally knocked down and pointing towards the water.
So everything was pointing towards the east. That's crazy.
Pointing towards the ocean where the captain always came through because he had to come through the Niantic Cove to get over to Mystic. Okay, so everything is thrown sideways, and I'm like freaking out, right? And she goes, "I told you, she followed you home and did that." I'm like, "There's no way." I says, "Maybe a coyote," and she's like, "Coyote, really?" I said, "I'm calling the cops." My wife's like, "Don't call the cops." I'm like, "I'm calling the cops. Calling the cops. This is vandalism." So I call the cops.
And you didn't hear a thing that
I'm
night.
an idiot. So I call him, and this cop shows up, and it's early in the morning, and he's like, "What's going on?" I said, "Listen, I know it sounds crazy, but look at my gazebo, look at the water, how it's written run." He's like, "I don't see any footprints." I said, "No, there's no footprints. I didn't." He goes, "Who hates you?" And I said, I don't have any enemies like that would come and vandalize my house like that." I said, "Look at the wood pile. Do you think coyotes would do that?" And he's like, "Have you ever seen a coyote throw wood around?" He said, "Unless you're watching the Roadrunner." And I'm like, well, I said, "My fence is knocked down. My wood pile's over." I said, "My gazebo's knocked on its side." And he says, "Hey man, I don't know what to tell you, but somebody's got it out for you." And I'm like, "Well, you know what happened yesterday?" And I tell him this freaking story. Like I'm telling him that a ghost followed me home and she's mad at me because we made fun of her. And I'm telling him this. And my wife is standing there like, "What is wrong with you? He's going to take you away." Right? So I tell him this whole story and he didn't say a damn word to me. And until I finished. And he says to me, "Why don't you just keep that shit under your hat?"
Right.
I swear to God, I'm like, "Okay." So I go back and I tell the restaurant owners what happened. And they're like, "You're such an ass." She says, "Mark, she followed you home. You pissed her off." She said, "I had given a server something from the restaurant that was there for years and years. Picture, I don't even know what it was. And this happened before I got there, so I couldn't even verify it. She had given her something, and the girl took it home that night. When she took it home, she put it in her closet, closed her closet door, went to bed. When she woke up in the morning, her closet door was open. Everything in her closet was thrown out on the floor. And the only thing in that closet was whatever it is that Allie had given this server. This girl freaked out, she said, brought that thing back like within within an hour, brought it back to the restaurant and said, "I don't want this thing." And she told them what happened. She said, "Yeah, she follows you. She follows people. She'll follow people home. She'll do, she wasn't really a mean ghost. She was playful. All right. To a point, you know, I had guests come up to me. These two older ladies came up to me one one night, and they're like, "Do you know whose child that is in the stairwell?" I'm like, "No." And she says, well, she's very rude. The lady's like, she's very rude. She's playing with a ball. We're trying to get up the stairs and she wouldn't even move for us. She wouldn't even talk to us when we told her to move. And I looked down into the hallway there and there's no one there. I'm like, oh, well, I said, I'll find it. I knew who it was. It was Ada. But I'm not going to tell them that because whatever. but but we had a guest and he was there with his date. I don't know if it was his wife. I don't know if it was his girlfriend, whatever. It was just two people at a table. And next to them were two other people at a table. And they were two tops. And I was out talking with the servers and I see this guy and he kind of like drops his utensils like this and he starts shaking. And I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing? And he leans over to the table next to him and he said, is your name David? And the guy goes, yeah. And he goes, the guy's like, why, do you know me? And he goes, no, I don't know you, but there's a little girl in my ear and she's whispering in my ear and she keeps telling me to say hi to David. He's sitting right next to you.
Mm-hmm.
I witnessed it. I walked over to the guy. I'm like, sir, was it a little girl's? He goes, it was a little girl and there's no little girls here. Am I going crazy? I said, no. And I had to tell him who it was. He wasn't too happy. Neither was the guy next to him. He was kind of like, this is some kind of joke. I'm like, no, it's not a joke. I mean, it's real. This happens a lot here. This is welcome to Mystic. So,
that's a place I'd go just to see if I could have an experience.
You know what? Yeah, we have a ghost tour. There's a ghost tour in Mystic that comes around and they go out to the haunted places. And one of their favorite stops is that restaurant, the Daniel Packer Inn, because when they go there on that third floor, sometimes you'll see a little girl looking out the window. Okay, and so I would see the tour coming. I would know. They usually came through around 9:30 at night. So I'd be leaving sometimes. And I made sure I kept my white chef coat on. Now, around the side of the building was a little alleyway with a gate door that opened up to the street where those people would stand and, and while the people were telling stories about Daniel Packer Inn and they're like, and the ghost Ada is up there and blah, 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 blah. And I would hear them through the gate, and I would make sure I'd open the gate really fast and I'd come out with the white chef coat on. Everyone would scream. It was great. I would do it all the time.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Where the ghost tour people were like, dude, can you tone it down a bit?
Nice.
Yeah. Well, Ada, one Thanksgiving, she was playing up on the third floor, I guess. It was Thanksgiving morning. It was probably about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. I had about 700 people coming in that night, and I knew it was going to be busy. So I'm there early. My crew was there early. We had a cleaning crew that used to come in and clean the restaurant for us. It was much more efficient, and it got done. So like 7 o'clock in the morning, one of the cleaning people came down to me, and she's like, "Chef, can you please tell the children to stay off the third floor? They're, playing around up there, and we just cleaned all the windows and they smudged all the bottoms of the windows with their fingers." I said to the lady, I'm like, "Hey, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. There's no kids here." And she says, "Well, go look at my windows." I went upstairs on the third floor. Sure enough, there were smudges all along the bottoms of the windows, little like hand smudges, no fingerprints, just smudges.
Right.
And of course, it was Ada. The lights would turn on. I'd leave at night, or the bartender would leave at night. We'd turn the lights off on the third floor of the attic. We'd come back in the morning, all the lights were on. People would drive by the restaurant and see lights on at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning when we were completely closed. With some crazy stuff over there.
That's crazy. Wow. So, yeah. Real quick, you also do a podcast called The Endless Enigma. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that real quick. What is that podcast about, and where can you find it?
Okay, you can find my podcast on pretty much anywhere. I believe I'm on 8 8 or 9 different platforms. I'm on Anchor. The podcast is about pretty much what you do: paranormal, UFOs. Um, I lived in Roswell, New Mexico. I had an experience that didn't turn out too well for me. Um, and I've been into this. I've been into this stuff all my life. When I was a kid, I used to go and try to make money so I could buy like the National Enquirer and the Star and the Globe, so I can get all those crazy, the stories like Bat Boy and shit
I
like that.
love that.
And
Like, that's the
and
only
I
reason
followed Sasquatch. Sasquatch was awesome, man. Well, back then they called him Bigfoot.
Yeah.
I was down in Folk, Arkansas, when all that crazy stuff happened in the late '60s, when they made the movie Boggy Creek. I was literally there visiting relatives when all this craziness was happening, and they're all like, "There's this monster in the woods," oh! And it just sparked it even more. It just made me more interested into it, So I'd follow Bigfoot, I'd follow UFOs. I watched all the monster movies I could because I was just into that kind of thing. And I've had a million experiences with ghosts from being a little kid, from being like 2 years old up. I had talked with my grandfather who died when my dad was 12, and he visited me all the time, and he was such a fixture in my house that I literally thought he lived with us. He was dead. He was dead for years. I never knew it. My mother always yelled at me, "Who are you talking to?" I'm talking to a man. And then she's like, "There's no man here." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm talking to the man." So one day my dad got sick of it, and he went rummaging through stuff, and he found a picture of his father. And he's like, brings out the picture. I'm like 3 years old, 4 years old. And he goes, "You know this guy?" I said, "Yeah, that's the guy. It's always in the room. That's the guy." And he's like, "No, that's my dad. He's dead. He died when I was 12." And I just didn't understand it because the guy was there all the time. And he was, my buddy.
Right?
So that didn't bother me. So I back to the show. So, I started Endless Enigma just because. I, I I'm interested in everything. I'm interested in paranormal. I'm interested in UFOs. Like I said, I had an experience when I lived in Roswell, um, which I waited for years. It happened, and it was absolutely bittersweet. And if you want me to tell you about it, I will.
Oh, we're going to go into it a little later.
Okay. So, it's what I like. I mean, I think, the Dogman thing is really cool. Mothman. Uh, I mean, Bigfoot. Absolutely. I absolutely think Bigfoot exists. Have I seen one? Hell no. Do I want to see one? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that might scare the hell out of me. I mean, something that big that I know is just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how I would react, but I'm not going to go looking for it. All right. We over the summer, earlier summer, me and my wife went up to Maine, and we rented this very remote outpost cabin in Sebec, Maine, and it was like in the middle of frigging nowhere. So when we got there, we had to drive down to like a 9-mile dirt road to get to the cabin. When we got there, we were getting our stuff out of the car and everything, and the owner comes up on her forward Ford there, and she drives up and just to greet us and make sure everything's cool, right? Now, of course, on the back of my car, I've got this giant Bigfoot sticker on the window, and it says "Squatchin," because that's me. Um, and so she's talking with us, and back and forth, making sure everything's okay, blah blah blah. And as she turns to leave to get back on her four-wheeler there, and she says, she sees the sticker on my car, and she said, "Are you up here looking for something?" And I'm like, "No, we're just here to get away from everything." And she's like, she looks at the sticker, she goes, "All right, no tree knocking." I said, "No, I'm not going to tree knock." And she says, I don't need that shit anymore. I don't want that shit to happen again up here. I don't need that shit." And I'm like, "Okay." And I left it. I left it alone. And you know what? At night, I was so goddamn scared to go outside that cabin because I stayed in the whole time. I'm like, "Nope, not going out, not going out." So apparently they must have had something go on up there. Which, okay, cool.
So, out of all the restaurants that you've worked at, which one would you say was the most haunted?
Well, the most haunted was definitely the Captain Daniel Packer Inn, but the scariest one, like they didn't that didn't scare me. To not really, but definitely the German restaurant in New London, with the guy coughing and hacking. I always got creeped out when I walked in there. I mean, I have this sense where I can feel if is it, I I know if there's the place is haunted or not. I mean, I could walk in. I've walked into houses and I'd say, nope, not going in, just not going in because there's something there and it's not good. But I've walked in other places where I say, oh yeah, this place is haunted, but it's cool. So I got those feelings at that restaurant, and the feelings were of dread, and the feelings, I didn't like it. I loved my job, I really did, but I just didn't like to go there. I hated being alone there, and unfortunately, I was alone there quite a bit. I was in the bathroom one night in that third dining room where that older lady I saw, that lady. Now, now the bathrooms there, the one in the bar is big. The one in this dining room is there are two bathrooms on either side, one man, one lady, and it's just walk in. It's a miniature sink and a toilet, and you're literally in a 3 by 3 area with the door. So I'm in there, closed the restaurant down. I had to go to the bathroom, so I'm standing there. I close the door and I'm going, and the handle starts shaking on the door. Now the door opened into the bathroom. So now I'm freaking out. I'm standing there on one leg with my other foot against the damn door. I'm pissing all over your place, trying to hold the door shut because I don't want this damn ghost coming in. So I got done. I was like, I was literally scared to leave the bathroom. I didn't want it. I just didn't want to see what was on the other side of the door, even though I knew it was just the dining room. But I was the only person there, and there was no freaking way anyone would be in there shaking a door handle. Scare the living piss out of me.
Yeah. See, there's certain times where I'd just be like, okay, I'm done. I can't even be here anymore. We're done. And that would be it. That would be it
Yeah,
for me.
that yeah, that. But I went back. But I went back. That's just who I am.
Has there ever been a restaurant that you walked into and you're just like, nope, can't do it?
Yeah. Yes. I did, down in New Haven, Connecticut. I walked into a restaurant actually for a job interview, um, and I was there literally 3 minutes, and I'm just looking around, going, "Oh hell no, no, I can't work here." So the guy says, "Oh, you're here for the interview?" I said, "No, I changed my mind. I walked out." So I talked to some people, weeks or something later, and I was asking about the restaurant. I'm like, "Hey, did anything ever happen?" And one guy says to me, "Dude, don't work there. It's fucked up. It's so haunted. It's unfreaking believable. 3 people were killed there. Blah blah blah." But and I felt it, and I had no idea. I just, like I said, I was there 3 minutes. I walked in and I'm like, "Oh, nope, I can't be here. No, I can't be here," and I left. And it's so weird because I've worked in big hotels like Marriott and Omni hotels where I was the executive chefs there, and the kitchens in the hotels had some phenomena in them. And we always used to kid. And I don't want to say the name of the restaurant, the hotel, but I already did. But I'm not going to tell you which one, just because I don't want to get sued. Our joke was, because I live in Connecticut and we're in a heavily First Nation, Native American area. We always said that this place is built on an ancient burial ground. And I mean, we would hear what sounded like bowling in one of the banquet rooms. It was, you'd be in there by yourself or with somebody, and you'd literally, it sounded like a bowling ball going down an alley, but super loud and super big. And there was nothing that would make that noise. I mean, I even asked the chief engineer, and I'm like, Dave, what? He goes, oh, you heard the bowling thing? And I'm like, yeah, bowling. He goes, we can't figure it out. We have no idea. He goes, it's the ancient burial ground thing, man. So
That's probably more true than what most people.
absolutely, absolutely. Oh yeah. And the rooms in a hotel, people get killed in hotels all the time. You just don't know it.
Oh yeah.
And the rooms are haunted. I had a story was told to me by one of the housekeeping staff that one of the girls was in a room, and she was cleaning the room up, and the door, now they put their big baskets in front of the door when they're in a room cleaning. It's for their own safety, so no one comes in and shuts them in and rapes them, and
Right.
because it happens.
Yeah.
So they put their big cleaning cart in front of the door while they're in the room. um, and the door was always open, and she was making the beds or whatever the hell it was, and the damn door shut from the inside. There was no one in the room but her, and the bathroom door slammed shut, and she lost her mind. I guess she quit. She ran out. She quit, I think, that day. Just freaking out, just freaking out because the doors slammed shut like that. She just done. I'm done.
And I'm sure if you live in a bigger city, like with hotels like that, you just don't know. Like,
You don't.
like if you live in a small town, like where I live, there's a hotel that's maybe a quarter mile away from me,
Mhm.
and there was somebody that was brutally murdered there like 3 months ago. Just some guy that was off his meds, got released from jail, probably shouldn't have been.
Yep.
Just brutally murdered this poor lady. And yeah, stuff like that. If you're a tourist, you don't know. The
Right.
and then after a while, locals forget about it.
Yeah. Exactly. And it just gets swept under the rug, and people go on and they don't know, and they experience things in their room.
Mm-hmm.
You know. I've walked into places, like I said. I walked into we were renting an apartment. This is years and years ago in Norwich, Connecticut, right in the center of Norwich, which has a huge history of pirates and hangings on the hill and stuff like that. And this house was very old. And I'll never forget, I walked in, and my wife stopped and turned and looked at me. And I looked at her, and I got goosebumps thinking about it right now. And she's like, "We can't." I said, "Oh no, turn around, let's go. Oh, I'm not moving in here. We already had that shit happen. I'm not staying here." Yeah.
So you've piqued my
Yeah.
curiosity about Roswell because I love UFOs almost more than anything in the world. And one day I
Okay.
will get my answer, and the government will tell the truth. Hopefully one day.
No, they won't.
You're right.
No,
They
they won't.
won't. They never
And
will.
all right. So after I tell you the story, um, you're gonna you're gonna see what the government does. Okay. So this is 2009. Me and my wife move out to Roswell, New Mexico. Wanted to get the hell out of Connecticut. She had a nephew that we kind of raised when he was a little kid, and he lived down there with his sister and his wife and his kids. And we decided, you know what? Let's go to Roswell. Let's go to Roswell because that's me. So, so I moved down there, and I didn't even have a job because I'm a chef. I can get a job anywhere I want. And it was funny because we moved down there to look for a job for me, and we went out to dinner in this Italian restaurant, which I really made fun of. Like before I'm like, oh, this Italian restaurant in the friggin' desert. Oh, this got to be great. So I went into the restaurant as a customer, and I walked out as their executive chef, which was kind of wild. Um, I wasn't even looking for the job. The guy came to me. He happened to be from New York City that owned the place. We hit it off, and he goes, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a chef." And he goes, "I need a chef. I need an executive chef." I'm like, "Well," He goes, you got a job? I said, not yet. He goes, you do now. All right, cool. So he says, so the job comes with the house on the other side of the alleyway, which was not an alleyway, it's a dirt road. So in the back of the restaurant was their parking lot, and then was this little dirt road, it was an access road where you put your garbage out and stuff. And it was this house, and it had 2 bedrooms in it, and it was on like a couple acres of land, and it had 2 living rooms, and it was a nice little house, and we moved in, right? And my job was literally 500 feet away. So how cool is that? And he paid good. So at night, close up the restaurant 11 o'clock at night or so. I'd come home, and first thing I do is, my wife's in there. I'd let the dog out, and me and the dog would go in the backyard and screw around. I'd have a beer, and he'd play and chase prairie dogs around and shit like that. So one night I'm out there doing the same thing, and I crack my beer open, take a sip, and I look up at the street light, which was across probably 150 yards away towards a hill. And I look at the streetlight, and over the streetlight, there's this thing, like a ball, and it's fluttering like this. And I'm like, is that an owl? What? I'm thinking it's an owl, right? But now I'm focusing on it, and I realize it's not on the street light, or it's in the sky behind it. And this thing must have been pretty freaking huge. But the way I'm looking, the angle I'm looking at it, it looked like it was right on top of the damn thing, but it wasn't. And I'm watching this thing, and it's doing this, all right? And then it goes like to the left, and then it kind of stops, and it's twinkling and pulsating. And then it started going like south towards town, towards the airport. And it's still doing, then it stops, and then it comes back again, and it's still doing this weird thing. And then it slowly just goes down towards the airport and the military base. Now, this is 20 minutes. This is not like 3 seconds. I'm watching this damn thing for 20 minutes. All right. I go in and run in the house. I'm like, check it out, check it out, check it out. So she sees it. My wife sees it. And she's like, oh, God, here we go. You're going to start. I'm like, come on, it's a UFO. It's a UFO. I said, I'm calling the airport. So I call the airport. It's 12:30 maybe. I'm sorry, we're not taking calls. Okay. It's the airport. You're not taking calls at the airport. Well, that's pretty stupid. So behind me, to the north, about 4 blocks up, is the New Mexico Military Institute. So it's kind of like military school. Basically, it's exactly what it is. So I'm calling NIMI. That's what they called it. So I find a number for NIMI, and it says, make the phone call. And it's like, I'm sorry, we're not taking calls. Well, that's pretty weird, because they're military, and they're not taking calls. The airport's not taking calls. I'm calling the police. So I call the cops, and I didn't call 911 because it wasn't an emergency, and I don't believe in tying up 911 lines. I just didn't call them. I knew the number. I called directly to the station. We are not taking calls. What freaking police station is not taking calls? What police station is not taking calls, right? I'm absolutely furious now. I'm spitting fire. My wife calms me down. She's like, you got to chill out, dude. They're going to think you're nuts. She goes, you saw it. You're just freaking out. I'm like, all right. So the next day, my neighbor, who was a preacher, imagine that, he's outside, and he lived probably a few hundred yards down the street from me. And I see him out there, and I go walking up to him. I'm going to tell him the story, right? So I go, hey, how you doing? He's like, hey, how are you, Mark? Doing good. I said, so last night he goes, oh, yeah, you're not from around here. And I'm like, well, I just moved here a little while ago. He's like, yeah. He goes, don't bother talking about whatever you saw. I said, but I saw this thing in this. He goes, don't leave it alone. Let it go for your own good. I'm like, come on, dude. So I said, I told him, I'm like, I called the police station. He goes, they didn't answer. I said, no. He's like, leave it alone. Leave it alone. Right? I'm not leaving it alone because I'm an idiot. Okay, so now I go into town. I knew everybody because I talk to people. So I start talking to people in the shop, the UFO museum, the guy that sold UFO souvenirs, his big shop there. Me and him were kind of friends. I was only there, what, 2 months, maybe. And I go to talk to him. I'm like, dude, I saw this. He goes, yeah. He goes, don't make a big deal of it, man. I said, yeah, but I couldn't get through to the airport, and I couldn't get through to NIMI, and I couldn't get through to the police station. He goes, well, then just leave it alone. He goes, if you couldn't get through to anybody, let it go. I'm not letting it go. So I'm talking to everybody, and I'm telling people all this story, what I saw. No one wanted to hear it. And this is Roswell. No one wanted to hear it. They're like, dude, just let it go. All right, you saw something. Cool. Whoop-de-doo, whoop-de-doo. And they're just kind of like really playing it off, which is kind of weird. So I'm like, I'm kind of pissed. And I go home. I'm at work one night. And again, I come out and I let the dog outside. And I'm standing in my backyard. And I have my beer. And my dog is playing. And I'm standing out there. And all of a sudden, this freaking light hits me from the sky, and I look, and it what looked to be a helicopter shining a light down on me in my yard, but there was no noise, no sound, and no wash from the propellers. Now it looked like a helicopter. It had no markings on it. It had no lights on it. It had nothing, but it was just hovering there, and it had the spotlight down in my yard and on me, right? And there's no noise and there's no wind. I mean, and it was only 300-400 feet in the air. I mean, something that low is going to be blowing everything around. All right,
Let alone you'll be
nothing,
able to hear it.
nothing. Right now, that I'm freaking out about that. I'm like, holy shit! All right, I'm gonna go in the house. Let's go. I got the dog. Let's go. So I tell my wife, and she's like, dude, you don't know when to stop. Just stop. And I'm like, no, there's something out there now. I said, it's not a UFO, it's a freaking helicopter. There's no sound. All right. So I decide to make a report to MUFON about the sighting that I had. All right. So I go and I find MUFON online, and I reached out, and an agent got back to me, and he emailed me a form to fill out, an incident report. And he sent me his telephone number and stuff like that. And I filled out the whole form about everything I did, everything I saw, what time it was, the temperature, had I been drinking. Actually, I just opened the beer. Technically, I was drinking. Actually, I just opened the beer. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I fill out this whole damn report and I send it to him. He, like I said, he sent me his phone number. So I'm waiting. He said, actually, he said in the email, send it to me, wait a couple days, and give me a call, and I'd like to talk with you. Cool. So wait a couple days, and I'm like, oh, maybe I give the guy a call. Pick up the phone, dial it. I'm sorry, this call can't be made from your phone. What? So I pick up my cell phone because I use the house phone. Dial the number. I'm sorry, this call cannot be made from your phone. That's weird. So I get back, I email the guy. I'm like, hey man, did you give me the right telephone number? And he's like, what? And I'm like, he said, yeah. He gets back to me. He goes, this is my number, and he goes, it's my cell phone. And I said, okay. So I tried calling it again. I'm sorry, this call can't be made from your phone. All right. So I sent him an email again, telling him what's going on. He got back to me, and he says, I just tried calling you and I can't get through. Okay, whatever. So now I got this weird helicopter, and MUFON can't get a hold of me. I'm trying to, like, okay, whatever, let it go, but I'm still not letting it go because that's who I am. I called my wife one day. I was at my nephew's house. I was coming home, and she didn't have a cell phone because she broke hers as usual. She had the house phone, and she had it out by the pool. So I called her and I'm coming home. I said, I'm on my way home. You want me to stop and get something? She's like, no, I'm cool. I get home and she's in the house and her face on one side is just out like this. I'm like, what the hell happened? She says, I'm sitting in the pool and I got my back on the rest and I got my arms on the side of the pool. And this guy walks up to me and punches me in the side of the face. And she said, I did it just he didn't even say anything. And she said, by the time I gained my senses after getting punched in the face, broadsided, I look, and there's a guy in a suit and he's walking up the street. And he walked up past the alleyway. He went up the alleyway because it was up a hill. And I'm like, what? She goes, this guy punched me. I'm not, I'm like, all right, I'm calling the cops. She's like, who was he? I'm like, I don't know who he was. Like, I called the police, right? I call the cops. 10 minutes go by. We're sitting out in front, and I have a beer because I always have a beer because I drink beer. And we're sitting on the front porch. My wife's face is like this, right? This car, white SUV Ford Expedition, the big one, brand new, beefy as hell, tinted windows, pulls in my driveway. Dude gets out, passenger side. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, who's this guy? Looks like an insurance salesman, right? So the guy walks up and he's like, did you call the police to report domestic? I'm like, what? He goes, did you call the police to report a domestic? I said, no. I called the police to report someone punched my wife in the face. She was in the pool. And he said, well, looks like you're drinking. I said, dude, I just got home 10 minutes ago. I'm not drinking. I just opened my beer. He goes, well, it looks like you guys are fighting and it's a domestic. I said, it's not. I didn't punch my wife. Look at my hands. My wife's like, he didn't punch me. This dude in a suit, she goes, he punched me. I went off to the side of the pool. And by the time I gained my senses, he was about 20 feet away from me and he had a suit on. So he's like, do you expect me to believe some banker punched your wife in the face? And I'm like, well, yeah. I don't know if the guy was a banker, but he had a suit on. I said, and he's like, listen, pal. He said, why don't you get in the house and do your drinking in the house and bring your wife with you and mind your own damn business. And he gets in the car, passenger side. They pull out of the driveway. My wife looks at him and she goes, the guy driving is the guy that punched me. And I'm like, really? And she goes, I swear to God, that looks like the guy that punched me. Okay, well, number one, how the fuck did they know I called the cops? All right. They never said they were police officers. They never showed identification. All right. But they insisted that I did this and I punched her and I was drunk and I wasn't, dude. So, okay, now all this weird stuff is happening. Why is this weird stuff happening? I don't know. Again, I come home from work and my wife, I came home, it was early afternoon. I was on a morning shift. My wife is in the living room freaking out. And she's like, get out of here. My husband's coming home. He'll kill you. He's crazy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at her and she's like insane. So I left the house and I'm like, fuck. All right, let me check out, make sure she's all right. I walk back in the house. I'm like, are you okay? And she's like, I thought you came home earlier. I said, no, I just got home. She goes, I, I don't know. She goes, I was in the kitchen and I thought I heard you come home and I came here out into the dining room and then I blacked out. And I don't remember. My head's killing me. I blacked out. And I said, but I just got home. She goes, yeah, but I didn't realize it was you. I was freaking out because I thought there was somebody in the house again. I'm like, what do you mean again? She goes, I think there was somebody in the house. And I don't remember. I blacked out. Okay. So she blacks out, and I said, "Are you all right?" And she goes, "Yeah, I think I'm okay." Well, apparently she wasn't okay, because 10 days later we were sitting on the couch and she died of an aneurysm right next to me, a brain aneurysm. So now, my wife is dead, and I call 911. She died, and the cops did show up, and an ambulance showed up, and there was a bunch of people in my house, and they were asking me a million questions because obviously she died in my house. So as they're taking her out, I walked to the front door. Instead of them putting her in the ambulance, they put her in the back of a white Ford SUV.
Wow.
Okay, okay, and then here it gets better. And then they take her to the funeral parlor. I get a call. Oh, Mr. Vecchitto, blah, 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 so and so from the funeral parlor, and we're ready to cremate your wife. And I'm like, whoa, 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 what are you talking about? Well, we'll have a showing, he says, and then we'll just cremate her. And I'm like, who said anything about cremation? And he's like, well, you have to travel back to Connecticut. And I'm like, how do you know I live in Connecticut? He's like, well, we'll have a showing, and he tells me this crap. So, okay, they have a showing, and I asked him, I said, so, when are we going to do whatever we have to do? And he goes, oh, well, the medical examiner's got to come down. What do you mean the medical examiner? He said the medical examiner has to pronounce her dead. Now, this was on the 23rd of October. This is when it happened. Her birthday is the 30th of October, day before Halloween. Now, the 28th, still nothing. I'm calling the funeral home, and I'm like, all right, dude, what's going on? He says, well, the medical examiner hasn't come down. I'm like, how can a medical examiner not come down? It's been 4 freaking days, right? 5 days. Why? He goes, well, we'll get it. We'll have everything all set. So then he calls me the next day and he says, we cremated her and you can come and pick up her remains. I'm like, I never said to cremate her, but now it's too freaking late. All right. So I go and pick her up, and I'm like, all right, you know what? I just got to go. I go back to Connecticut. Um, and I went on my computer to check out to see, if the guy got back to me from MUFON. Just, I don't know why. I was just, and all correspondence on my computer was wiped out between me and MUFON. It's not anywhere to be found. It's not in any of my emails. It's not in my spam file. It's not in my junk file. It's not in my delete file. It's not anywhere. It was missing. It was wiped off my laptop, and I didn't do it.
Wow.
Time to go. Time to go.
That is crazy. I mean, for one, the whole cremation thing. I mean, that's
But
you,
right,
I
and
have never heard of that where somebody's like, "Well, we're just going to cremate."
and it was like they did what they wanted to do, whatever they wanted to do. Why did you cremate her? Why? I mean, who said anything about that? Who said that I lived in Connecticut? You know, the guy's like, oh, well, you're going back to Connecticut. How do you know?
Right?
How do you know? It's a true story. This
Wow.
happened. This happened 2009. Um, yeah, like, and I haven't talked about it until recently because you know it's 11 years now. Um, I don't think you're coming back for me. you
No,
know,
no.
you
But
know.
Connecticut is a UFO hotspot.
Oh, huge. I know.
Yeah. Yeah. So they may still be looking out for you.
Yeah, I always look over my shoulder.
That's a crazy story. Yeah, yeah. It almost makes me never want to go to Roswell now.
Yeah, it was surreal. It was bizarre. I mean, and I never even thought of Men in Black or anything like that. But you know what? After the fact and after everything happened to me, and this didn't happen till months, maybe a year after that all this happened, that I really started thinking about it. And could that have been? Could they have been? I don't know. Were they in suits? Yes. Um, did they have a white shirt and a tie? Yes. Did they look like bankers? Yes. I don't know.
I believe the Men in Black are out there. I really do. I do believe in the Men in Black.
Yeah. So, hey, that's some of my stories.
That's an insane, crazy story.
Bizarre. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Wow. And it's too bad. I feel bad because you lost your wife in that.
Yeah. Of 29 years. We were married 29 years.
Wow. Yeah. And just an aneurysm out of nowhere. Well, I'm sure it had to do with, maybe getting punched in the face and, some whatever else happened.
Yeah. It's like, and why cremate her if I don't know. And this is a theory. What did they do something to her and didn't want it to be revealed? I don't know.
All because, you were trying to find answers. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. I would want to find answers too, though. I wouldn't be one to just say, "Oh, okay, so that didn't happen."
Yeah, it happened. Yeah, that happened, and oh well, shit happens. And it was always screwed up. But I mean, that's a story, and that's a true story, and that's where I'm at.
And then you moved back to Connecticut, and yeah.
Within a month. I think this happened all in October 30th, around there. And I think I was back in Connecticut before Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would have been gone too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
You made the right choice.
Yes, I did.
Well, Mark, it was great having you on, talking about restaurants and even Roswell. I love stories about UFOs, even though if they do have sad endings, I mean, I still like talking about them. But I appreciate you coming on. Definitely check out the Endless Enigma. You can find that where at?
You can find me on probably all of your platforms that you get your favorite podcasts. Applecast, Podbean, Spotify. I'm all over the place. I just started it up. So I've got a few episodes out there. I've talked to quite a few people. Had some cool people on. I have a lot more people on their way.
Nice. So, and if people want to reach out to you, where can they do that at?
Sure. You can reach out to me at Endless Enigma on Instagram or Enigma on Facebook, or you can email me at enigmapodcast1@gmail.com. And you can hit me up if you guys got stories. Anyone wants to tell me a story, they want to, they saw a Bigfoot, they saw a dog man, anything. I want to talk about it. And if you got a UFO story and a ghost story, I definitely want to talk about it.
See, my goal is to talk to a time traveler.
Oh,
like, you remember Art Bell when he would do the old open lines?
Yes, I loved Art Bell.
And he had the time travelers come on. I want a time traveler to come on in this show and talk to me.
I gotta find one.
Well, if you find one, send him my way.
Yeah. All right, Jack, man. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed.
I did, and I
had to say.
Definitely going to check out some restaurants next time I'm up in New England.
Yeah, anytime you're in Connecticut area, please hit me up. I'll make sure you're a guest. I'm in New Haven right now, and we're going to be opening a place in Baltimore pretty soon, which is going to be kind of cool. So if you're ever in the area, I'll bring you around to some good ones.
Nice. Look forward to it.